Alexei! Yes! 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 History!
Mark Buehrle is a White Sox legend. One of the best pitchers, one of the best players to ever wear the uniform. And when he retired from the game after the 2015 season, his resume certainly did not scream Hall of Famer. 214 wins, less than 2,000 strikeouts, no Cy Young awards. He was very much a member of the Hall of the Very Good, kind of like Paul Konerko. But as the game continues to change and you dig deeper into Buehrle's numbers and accomplishments, his case tells a different story. Looking through the lens here in 2025 versus 2015, Buehrle's candidacy is, in my opinion, getting stronger. But will Hall of Fame voters agree? On the podcast today, Brian Kenny from MLB Network, who makes a living digging into baseball numbers. And if he had a vote, and come on, he should have a vote, he would vote Mark Buehrle into the Hall of Fame. Buehrle had a fascinating career, and this is a fascinating case beyond what you might think. So Brian Kenny and I are here to break it all down, and he's going to do it inside the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, right here on the podcast. Let's do it. All right, Brian Kenny, my former ESPN News compadre. He is the host of MLB Now on MLB Network. He is literally in Cooperstown for the Hall of Fame election announcement, which will air exclusively on MLB Network Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Time. And BK, you're literally in the hall, literally right there. Tell us about what you're feeling right now as the induction or the announcement is about to come, and we want to get Buehrle in there, obviously.
Yeah, I know. We look, it's Chuck. It's always exciting to come here. I remember coming here for ESPN. Wow, it's got to be 25, 26 years ago now with Tim Kurkjian, and we were so excited because they would close the Hall of Fame and we would shoot our stand-ups. So all these years later, decades later, I'm here shooting my stand-ups the day before the show. It's just now we've spread it on MLB Network. Obviously, we do a lot more baseball now than ESPN. And so we do the official announcement with the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame, Josh Rawitsch. We have it live on Tuesday night. And so I'm here night before taping all my stand-ups. I did essays on Ichiro, CC Sabathia, and Andrew Jones for MLB Now, which will be on 2 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday, which starts our coverage all through the night on MLB Network. So, yeah, this is an opportunity. The place is closed. We have it to ourselves. Maybe I'll walk you around a little bit later. But it's like being a kid again. It's like they close the museum. You get to run around like a kid.
And we've got the exclusive interview with Brian Kenny inside the hall of the Hall of Fame. I can see some of the plaques behind you. We'll get to that in a moment. But listen, since Mark Buehrle got on the ballot in 2020, I think I've done this podcast every year talking about his candidacy. And back in 2020, when he first got on the ballot, you came on the podcast and I got a quote from you. You said at the time about him getting into the Hall of Fame, you said it's a long shot, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So here we are in 2025. Brian Kenny, if you had a vote, would you vote Mark Buehrle into the Hall of Fame?
Yes, if I had room. Now, he's a borderline candidate, Chuck, but I think there is room for a guy with amazing consistency, especially given the context of his era. The 14 or 15 straight years with 200 innings, the very good run prevention, also good postseason totals as well. He has a World Series championship. He was a big part of that club. I was looking at it from another perspective that, okay, this is not the normal Hall of Famer. Look, Buehrle did not have the career of Gaylord Perry or Tom Seaver or Bob Gibson. I understand that. But in this day and age, like 15 years, 200 innings, I think we already realize, like, already pitchers are not doing, you know how many pitched, you probably do know, how many pitched 200 innings in the majors last year?
I think it was 4.
4, correct. Yeah. 4, Chuck. So he did it for 15 straight years. It was not that long ago. So it's not the 1960s where Fergie Jenkins is throwing 300 innings. It was an era when he was pitching. There were guys doing 200, some 220, that sort of thing. And he did that with amazing consistency. And I'm thinking, when I think of the Hall of Fame, I think of it very broadly. And I think of, if you're a GM or a manager or an owner, and you could have a player for his whole career, what would be over the line for Hall of Fame production for your franchise? And I think if you look at it that way, you draft Mark Buehrle, you could have him for 17, 18, 19 years. You have his whole career. Does he raise himself over the line for a Hall of Fame career for your franchise? I think the answer is yes. So yes, I would put Buehrle in my Jimmy Rollins, like my last 9 and 10 spot, but I really think those guys could be Hall of Famers. And if I had a vote and I had room, yes.
So he's a 5-time All-Star, 4 Gold Gloves, perfect game, no hitter. But I look at him, he had a unicorn career. He is a unicorn because you don't have the 300 wins, the 3,000 strikeouts. That is no longer going to probably happen. Maybe it's Verlander, and that's about it. And you look at his era from 2000 to 2015. Who pitched the most innings? Buehrle did. Who won the most games? Buehrle and CC Sabathia.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, you want the guy to pitch. You want him to get wins, although wins obviously are different nowadays. But
right.
I mean, don't you feel like voters need to dig into this a little bit more than just, oh, there's Mark Buehrle. That's what he was. He was very good.
I think CC Sabathia, who is likely to get in this week, he's likely to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, which surprises me. But the writers are immediately able to put him in context, not worry about the wins. 251. Again, Curt Schilling, not that long ago, was held out of the Hall of Fame, not because of his controversial social media things. At the time when he was first ballot, he had, does he have 216 wins? Refresh my memory, Chuck.
Buehrle, yes.
Yeah. Schilling.
Let me check. Go ahead, but I'll check.
16. And at the time, the thought was, that's not a lot of wins. And I'm thinking, wait a second, all I hear from you writers is winning titles and being a winner and being a gritty gamer. I don't know what more, I'm not like his best friend. And I'm saying, what more do you want from the guy? Is it 216?
216.
216 wins for Schilling. And it was deemed short, like not enough. So Schilling was kept out. Look, Schilling's run prevention, his ERA plus, is about the same innings. He pitched about the same innings as CC Sabathia. His run prevention is much higher than CC Sabathia. He was a much more dominant pitcher. And in the postseason, as good as Sabathia was, Schilling was even better and led his team to more titles, right? So, but I think now writers are looking at it differently. 251 probably seems like a lot more these days. They know that he has the most innings in the wild card era, which means something. And he does have these championship moments, historic moments. His 2008, his 2009 were tremendous. But I really think him getting in has to force you, if you're a writer with a good conscience and a good sense of what this is all about, to look at Mark Buehrle and Andy Pettitte and say, I'm looking at essentially the same innings. I'm essentially looking at the same level of run prevention. Their ERA plus for all three is identical, 117, 116. They're all about 3,500 innings. They all have very good postseason records. Buehrle, shorter period of time, didn't have as many chances, but Pettitte, won 5 titles, helped win 5 titles. So I think as a writer, if you're thinking Sabathia is a first ballot Hall of Famer, what do you do with Pettitte and Buehrle? I know it doesn't normally work that way, Chuck. You know that too, but I'm saying we have a lot of logical voters now who really do work at this. The young Jay Jaffes of the world who really, consider this an obligation and a science. And I think you can't look at it any other way, except if you think, Pettitte's PED ties, his admission, that should hold him out. Okay, fine. I'm willing to look at everybody's case individually, whether it's Pettitte or Gary Sheffield, and say, you know what? If I believe that a guy used, and copped to it for a short period of time, I could vote him into the Hall of Fame. I'm willing to honor someone like that. It's the guys who have lied about it for a long period of time that got their numbers surreptitiously that I will not vote for. So I'm looking at, yes, Buehrle, Pettitte, and Sabathia. They're about the same, and I think this will force writers to look at it that way.
So Schilling had 216 wins. Buehrle was 214. By the way, from 2001 to 2015, Buehrle pitched 243 innings more than anybody in baseball. Who was second? Sabathia. So yeah. Buehrle pitched a full season more than anybody else during that time. And I mean, and I've just got so many stats here that like really give the essence of who he was. A lot of it has to do with those 200 innings. Okay. The only pitchers in the modern era with 14 consecutive seasons of 200 innings are Mark Buehrle, Christy Mathewson, Warren Spahn, Gaylord Perry, Greg Maddux, Phil Niekro, Don Sutton. 6 of those pitchers are in the Hall of Fame. The other is Buehrle.
Yeah. Yeah. And now those guys admittedly were doing 300 innings here and there. So but it's always the context of your time. Right. Just like if you had someone now pitch 240 innings, which would have been nice in 1993, let's say, it'd be mind blowing. A guy pitching 240 innings now would be super valuable. So yes, you're correct. I think that it's hard. You need to get the place and time precisely with Buehrle and think of what's the value of having a guaranteed run prevention of, I think in his peak, it's about a 120 something ERA plus, well above average pitcher who is giving you this, like, not missing starts. By the way, Don Sutton, same thing. I used to hear about Don Sutton. Well, he was never the best guy on his staff. Okay, Lou Gehrig was never the best player on his team. So he's still a top 7 player in the history of the game. You know, you can be a great player. You put up the totality of the value of Mark Buehrle, you start to come to grips with this guy in context was an Iron Man and was extremely valuable and something very rare in the sport that is getting even more rare now.
Yeah, going back to what I said about him being a unicorn. How about this? 2004, 2005, Buehrle ran off 49 straight starts of 6 innings or more. Mm-hmm. The streak ended because he was ejected for hitting B.J. Surhoff with 2 outs in the 6th inning.
All right.
So after that, he started another 10-game streak after that. My question for you is, and we've had this discussion before, there is peak versus longevity. Yep. Longevity versus peak. And that is the quagmire that these voters have to decipher. What is more important? How do you judge peak versus longevity? Because this was just a slow, gradual, amazingly consistent pitcher versus someone who was the best pitcher in the game at the time.
Well, you know what? He has comps, and the winner of that, you're presenting that either or scenario, and the clear winner was career over peak. Like, it was no question this Hall of Fame when you didn't have the baseball encyclopedia, let alone baseball reference, so you could see year by year. An average sports writer couldn't look at a guy's record year by year. You had to call the Hall of Fame and get their researchers to give you Nap Lajoie's year by year. So all you had were their totals. So the things that stood out, I try to tell this to people, like, look, this is the 1930s. They're trying to figure out who are the greatest players of all time. All they have are the totals and the championships and the years played. So naturally, it would swerve over to longevity and service time. It would gear toward that. I think in this day and age, I'm much more inclined to look at the peak. I'm much more inclined to be behind Dale Murphy, Don Mattingly, Johan Santana, guys who were the best players in their leagues for, say, 3 to 4 years. I'm not saying 1 year, not 2, 3 to 4, 3 to 5. If you're the best player in your league, and that's Murphy and Mattingly, and Johan was the best pitcher in baseball for 4 years, both leagues, I think that's a greater player. I think that's kind of a greater career. And writers haven't seen it that way. So actually, this is happening now, and I think people are starting to see it my way. Chase Utley got a good amount of support last year. He's much more of a peak player. Dave Parker just got into the Hall of Fame, much more of a peak player. This is now moving toward peak. Just at the time, here comes Buehrle, who's very 1930s, and showing up and saying, wait, I'm doing 200 innings a year when, 200 is like 300 now. So it's kind of moving away from that. But I think we just have to have an open mind and see, hey, there are players like this, and maybe it's Lou Whitaker as well. I've been torn on this, Chuck. You'll like this. Lou Whitaker, right? He wasn't a 5 or a 6-win player for 10 years, but he was a 4-win player for 15. So is that good enough? And I'm thinking it's on the border, but I'm thinking yes. I think actually, again, you draft and develop Lou Whitaker. You've got that guy for 15 years. Is that Hall of Fame work that you're getting for your Detroit Tiger franchise? The answer is kind of yes on that.
And 15 years ago, did everyone bring up defensive runs saved? Was that even in the ether? Right? So as your phone came down.
Okay.
Was it? Okay. So, 15 years ago, was defensive runs saved even in the ether? No one was even talking about that. Well, Paul Casella of MLB.com put this together. For his career, Buehrle had 87 defensive runs saved, tied with Zach Greinke for the most by any pitcher since 2003 when they started tracking the stat. The next closest, Jake Westbrook, 63. So 87 to 63 for Buehrle. Yeah. And for the modern voter, right? The modern voter who likes to dig into all these statistics, well, there's a great one for Buehrle, but they're not apparently looking at that. And so now it's a question of how does he jump over that?
Chuck, pitcher defense. Look, Jim Cott won 16 Gold Gloves. He got in a few years ago, in the Veterans Committee. Greg Maddux won a whole bunch of Gold Gloves. Gold Gloves at pitcher. But it points out the type of pitcher Buehrle was. He worked fast. He didn't allow extra bases. He fielded his position beautifully. And games went quickly, and he kept his defense engaged. All right, these are all plus signs. I'm not diminishing it. They're plus signs, but I'm not going to get caught up in retroactive defensive metrics for pitchers. I'm going to push back on that, Chuck.
I'm trying everything in my power.
I'm with you, Chuck.
Mark Buehrle into the Hall of Fame. So, all right, you are not a voter. How you do not have a vote for the Hall of Fame? Brian Kenny, you're literally in the Hall of Fame right now. And I see every year these people who are not even baseball writers anymore, they cover other sports and they have a vote for the Hall of Fame. And it's, in my opinion, despicable. But you put together a mythical ballot. If you did have a vote, I have it here unless you remember it off the top of your head, because I do know that one person is on it and happens to be the subject of this podcast.
Oh, Buehrle. Wait. Yeah. Oh, good. Jeez, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. Read it to me. I'm going, Ichiro, Sabathia, yes. I also went Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley. I went Buehrle, Andrew Jones. Go ahead, pick it up from there.
Yeah, Billy Wagner.
Billy Wagner, yes.
Yeah, Gary Sheffield.
Oh, Sheffield's from last year. He's not this year.
Oh, that was last year. Okay, I'm looking. You know what? Sorry, I have last year's ballot on. Because you're naming all these. Naming all these guys. I'm like, I didn't have that. You had. Okay, so I'm looking at the wrong ballot. But you do have Buehrle on your ballot for this year, right?
Yes. I would have Buehrle. I would be, if I had an actual vote, I might be that guy who doesn't vote for Ichiro to throw a vote to Dustin Pedroia, knowing that Pedroia might not get 5%. And look, we're talking about Andrew Jones is getting Andrew Jones gets my vote too. Andrew Jones is very close, but he's lucky he came along just a few years later, that the way he retired a little later on. And had he retired a few years earlier, it could have happened to him what happened to Jim Edmonds. Think about this: Jim Edmonds, Bernie Williams, Kenny Lofton. They all fell off the ballot. They didn't get 5%. You want to tell me those three guys aren't candidates? But at the time, you had all the PED guys sucking up votes that were still there, getting 60% of the votes. Kurt Schilling, who was controversial, but not getting off the ballot and getting over the top. So it was very difficult for center fielders to even get 5%. So I might be strategic and not go with Sabathia, knowing he's got plenty of votes, he's fine. And Ichiro, if he gets 98% of the votes, so what? I need to keep, my guys who are at the very bottom. Again, Dustin Pedroia should be considered. He should be. David Wright should stay on the ballot. I might be strategic if I had a vote.
All right. So Buehrle's first year on the ballot, he got 11% of the vote. Last year, 8.3%. He's currently tracking at 12.7%. There are stories like Billy Wagner, who was at 10.5% in his debut in 2016, and it increased to 73% last year. How do you see this tracking for Mark Buehrle going forward?
It's hard to tell what will pick up traction, what becomes fashionable, who becomes a cause. But we've seen over the last decade, and this is a good thing, I think, on the by and large, it's the good part of social media where pressure can come to bear, where people can start talking about, starting with, it was Burt Blyleven, was now 15 years ago, but Blyleven needed 15 years, but he was very much a sabermetric cause. Tim Raines, Edgar Martinez, Mike Messina, Larry Walker. Andrew Jones started back-to-back years at 7%. He barely stayed on the ballot. And now he's up around 62%, and he'll be around 70% probably this year. So I think, who knows? Larry Walker came up out of nowhere as people were looking at WAR and his slash line year by year, which was outrageous. And it became a thing, and people felt pressured, and it got popular. I think the Sabathia effect We're going to find out this year and next year how much of an effect does CC Sabathia getting a first ballot induction. Again, we're not talking about he's getting in year 5 or 6. Goose Gossage waited 9 years, I think. Goose Gossage is crazy. So if Sabathia gets in year 1, I think there's going to be an uptick for Andy Pettitte and Mark Buehrle.
Only 4 pitchers in the live ball era have at least 2 no-hitters and 15 straight seasons of double-digit wins. Warren Spahn.
You're emptying the magazine.
I am. Here we go. Ready? I love these.
The innings and the ERA plus for those 3: Sabathia, Pettitte, Buehrle, and then throw in the postseason, and you're looking at very similar. I know nobody's exactly the same, but they're actually fairly similar. Like, Sabathia might have the greatest moments. Pettitte has the most championships and the most volume in the postseason. He has a lot of failure. He has failure as well. And Buehrle has these, perfect game, no hitter, and also, a World Series championship that was very real.
Yeah, I want to finish this stat because I like it. I don't care if you are like whatever. Only 4 pitchers in the live ball era have at least 2 no-hitters and 15 straight seasons of double-digit wins. I want to say this because here are the names: Warren Spahn, Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson, Mark Buehrle. And Buehrle did this in the middle of the steroid era, throwing 85 miles per hour.
Duly noted.
Thank you. Here's what it is. It's branding. We need to brand Mark Buehrle as this unicorn, and people need to appreciate what he did, because when he retired, I'm like, he's not a Hall of Famer. And then I really dug into the numbers, and I saw where this whole sport is going and what it was. And I'm like, wait a second. Am I saying he should get 80% of the vote? No. But right now we should be getting more than 10.
Yes, I agree.
All right. So do you think he'll ever get in the Hall of Fame? Last question.
Maybe. I don't know. It's going to be a close call. Let's see what the next 2 years bring. There could be a surge, and I'd have to see what pitchers are hitting the ballot, because that could hurt him. But if that whole Verlander, Scherzer wave, and obviously Greinke wave is a couple of years off, what other pitchers are hitting the ballot, starting pitchers are hitting the ballot over the next 5 to 7 years? I think that will, because a lot of times, like Mickey Lolich had good support the first couple of years, and then suddenly Seaver and all these big-time guys are hitting the ballot, and suddenly Mickey Lolich didn't look so hot anymore. Whereas initially, when he first retired, people were thinking, no, Lolich was a great pitcher, and he was, and great in the postseason. But yeah, we'll have to see. It's a tough slog. But let's see this year, next year, Pettitte and Buehrle, maybe they're kind of a tandem that people are recognizing the excellence of being, extremely good for a long period of time and having lots of winning championship moments. Yeah, well, if starters keep going 5 innings, 4 innings, Mark Buehrle is going to look like Walter Johnson. And that's happening. By the way, that's going to continue. They're 4 1/3 now. That's going to continue. All right, maybe gets in the Veterans Committee. All right, last thing, you are in the Hall of Fame. I see plaques behind you. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to pick up your phone and give us a little bit of a tour of all the big names, big White Sox names. I've been there for when Frank Thomas got in, when Jim Thome got in. Those were special, special days. Hawk Harrelson's a Ford Frick Award winner. So who do you see? You know what? Here's one that you don't find all the time. Let me see if I can square this up. There's Louis Aparicio. Oh, that's special. Yeah. All right, so we found Louis. I'm sorry, that's not the best shot. I'm trying to get it this way. There's Louis Aparicio, inducted in the early 80s. Maybe that's 1983. Right in there. George Kell, Brooks Robinson is in this corner. Harmon Killebrew is in this corner. Frank Thomas is more in this wing. But as we go this way, you can see we get to the more modern players. And over the last few years, and they're running out of room, Chuck. Like, I don't know where Buehrle's going to go. They're going to have to build an extension around here. But this won't they have his own wing? Won't Buehrle just have his own wing when he gets in there? If you have your way, then yes, he will. This is the corner here. Let me see where we go. Here's Joe Mauer, right here. Todd Helton is here. Scott Rowland, Jim Leland up here. Fred McGriff, Buck O'Neill. So this is the corner where they built, and they're like running out of room. They're going to have to start going on this wall. And Marvin Miller, Lee Smith. So there you go, like all the pots. And they have in the middle here, this is a cool spot here. Take a look. There's the statues, Ted Williams and Babe Ruth. Not the best cameraman. And here they have the original class. So
the original class. Let's see those.
Next time you get a tidbit for Christy Matheson. There you go. You can work off that. There's the Bambino.
Babe Ruth. There's his plaque.
Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Walter Johnson, and Hannes Wagner. So that's the first class.
Well, if you have not been to Cooperstown, no matter what time of year, although obviously summer is much better than the winter, I highly recommend.
I don't know.
Everybody.
I love the snow, Chuck. It's nice here now too. And there's look, Chuck. No lines, no waiting. Well, it's closed now.
The only person in the Hall of Fame right now is Brian Kenny, and everybody who is either listening or watching this podcast. Thank you so much. You are the man.
Thank you,
BK,
Chuck.
Brian Kenny. Watch him on MLB Network, MLB The Show. He'll be there for the big induction announcement on Tuesday on MLB Network. Make sure you watch it and watch him all the time. He's one of the best in the business. And if it was my decision to make, he would have his own vote for the Hall of Fame. I'm going to start that campaign.
Tidbits on me. Thank you.
Okay.
You're the best.
That is a wrap for this yeah, that's the wrap for this edition of the White Sox Podcast. Hawk Harrelson, take it away.
All right, Art Chuck. This edition of the White Sox Podcast is over.